It happens to many podcasters, and it finally happened to me. I podfaded. I got busy with other stuff, and this show fell by the wayside. And while I'm extremely grateful to have much more client work to do, I'm going to try to be better about putting out the JAG Show. Thank you to those of you who've asked about it. Today's actually the perfect day to bring it back, and I'll tell you why in a second.
And now, a look at what's trending in the podcast world and how it can help your show. It's the JAG Show podcast.
As of today, April 3rd, 2024, you can no longer listen to podcasts in the Google Podcast app. And if you use the Google Podcast Manager as a podcast creator, that's going to be gone July 29th. Now, while Google Podcasts represent a small percentage of downloads, it's not insignificant. Most likely, those users will move to one of the big three podcast consumption platforms, Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. But there may be other apps that they like those with smaller market share, Pocket Casts, Podbean, Podcast Addict, and there are others. You can also use YouTube Music. Now, if you follow or subscribe to a lot of shows, it might be a bear to add all of your favorite new pods in the new app. Google does have a tech support article on how you can try to migrate your subscriptions. It's linked in today's show notes. Meanwhile, at the opposite end of the spectrum, Apple Podcasts rolled out a new improvement, podcast transcripts. Now, you won't be able to see them until you upgrade your iOS to version 17.4 or higher. I did that this morning. Gotta say, the auto-generated transcripts are pretty good. You can tap on the text to jump to that part of a show. The only drawback seems to be that they don't separate out speakers or have timestamps. Now, for that, you'd need to upload your own transcript. I tried playing with this in Apple and found it to be very hard to navigate. Also, I reached out to my podcast host, Simplecast. They told me Apple did not give the podcast hosts any notice before announcing this feature to the general public. So now they're going to be playing catch-up throughout 2024. Their guidance was just use the automated transcription for Apple for now. Speaking of podcast hosts, who's the biggest? Well, according to livewire.io, of all the podcasts published in March of 2024, Spotify for Podcasters, formerly Anchor, tops the list at 29%. Now, this isn't surprising, considering Spotify for Podcasts doesn't charge for the service and they support video directly into Spotify. However, putting all of your eggs in the Spotify for Podcasts /Anchor basket always makes me nervous. Why is it free? Because the same company competing for your listeners' bandwidth for downloads is now also hosting your show. All your eggs, again, in one basket. What if Spotify goes down? Now, nobody can get your show on Apple, YouTube, or anywhere else. It's kind of like having your portfolio only invested in the company you work for. It's awesome when things are great, but if something happens, you're in trouble. By the way, how old am I for making that analogy? Shout out to my financial advisors, I guess. Alex, Ed, Amy, Bruce. I've been paying attention. Okay, the other big news in podcasting was the release of Edison Research's annual Infinite Dial survey. This, in my opinion, is the industry standard. I quote it when I'm pitching potential clients, and it's both a great snapshot of the industry and how far it's grown since the survey started a decade ago. They poll Americans ages 12 and up, and here are some of the highlights. 67%, that's two-thirds of all Americans, 192 million, have listened to a podcast. 47%, almost half in the last month. 34%, more than a third, in the last week. Podcast listening among women has driven a lot of growth in the last year. That's up 15%. 45% of women in the survey have consumed a podcast in the last month. Among regular weekly podcast listeners, they average about 8 episodes per week. So, my MySpace analogy. What makes your show unique and is going to connect with your audience to a level where you're going to crack their top 8? Here's the major change that should affect advertisers, if they're smart. Among the 18 or 34-year-old demo, podcasts are just as popular as television. Pods reach 48% of this group compared to 50% for TV, and that's both live and over DVR. And if you expand that to the all-important 18 to 49-year-old demographic, TV, not that far ahead there either. 46% of folks consume podcasts weekly compared to 58% for television, and that's, again, 18 to 49. Looks like some of those ad dollars should head toward podcasting. Here's the bottom line. While the ways we consume podcasts may evolve, and what listeners call a podcast can change, podcasting as a medium is here to stay. It had hockey stick growth in 2020 during COVID, and after a brief dip, it's back to seeing all-time highs every single year. If you have any questions about podcasting, whether industry-related or you want to know about your own show, you can always shoot me an email, jag@jagindetroit.com. Later.
The most popular ways to grow a podcast are recommendations of friends and family. So share this episode with someone you know. And for any questions you have about podcasts, find JAG online at jagindetroit.com.